Well, happy Monday. Got tons to get to today. Everything from the latest in the news around the gun ban and litigation. This week, some big dates coming up, including on the 12th. But we've also got stuff going on when it comes to the migrant crisis. From Governor J.B. Pritzker issuing an 18th executive order with disaster proclamations claiming the state is in a disaster because of the ongoing migrant crisis. But one state representative heading to the southern border recently. He joins us coming up next. So we'll talk about that and more, including crime in Chicago and the sentiments from those on the streets. We chatted with William Kelly earlier this morning. I'll share that with you also. But it's all on the way here with Bishop on Air. All right, stay tuned. We got tons to get to. Thanks for tuning in each and every weekday morning. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's make it happen, all right? On Friday, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker issued an 18th executive order, a disaster proclamation for the state's migrant crisis. What exactly does that type of action do? Well, look back over the COVID years where there were more than 3 years worth of disaster proclamations. And what that did is it freed up the governor's ability to spend money. And now we've got an 18th disaster proclamation in the state of Illinois dealing with the ongoing migrant crisis. And that has allowed the governor to spend $500 million, and more is expected. To talk about this and more, we're joined now by State Representative Brad Halbrook, who actually traveled down to the southern U.S. border. He joins us now. Representative, thanks for taking time with us this morning. Tell us about what ultimately transpired. How come you guys headed down to the southern border? Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Greg, and thanks for having me on, and congratulations on continued success on your YouTube channel. You're hitting on all the right notes, and I know everybody likes it. So we had the opportunity to go to Eagle Pass, Texas last Thursday, spent the day there. We were hoping to go yet later this week. Things got moved up, and so we traveled down there late last week. Eye-opening experience, to say the least, and I would advise everybody to take a trip down there that's involved in policymaking or want to know what the real story is, because you get the truth when you're down there on the ground.
So if you could just kind of explain what you saw down there. You shared with me some video that we'll show here, but what did you guys see when you were down on the southern border?
Right. So we went to an NGO. It was called Mission Border Hope, that processes illegal aliens as the Border Patrol brings them up from the river as they've crossed. We were able to go there. I wasn't able to completely tour the facility as much as we had hoped, but we did get to talk briefly with the assistant director. There was a facility right to the side of where we were at in the parking lot that was housed, they were just temporary shelter, if you will, just a roof with plastic sidewalls, 150, couple hundred migrants that was in there waiting to be moved on to the next location. We went on to Bridge 2, and underneath Bridge 2 is one of the major crossing points into Texas from Mexico. If there's some pictures and been shared around on social media, this site was basically empty when we were there on Thursday. However, there was a congressional delegation of 60 plus congressmen and women from across the United States that had visited there on Wednesday. So this site was empty. The reference to the pictures that were circulated right before Christmas was these fields, or this field, this processing area under Bridge 2 was completely jam-packed. I mean, this area is seeing thousands of migrants a day cross over the river. And then one of the other third most important spots we went to was a farm just east of town, a pecan farm, 400 acres. And this was a stunning stop. I got to see how they're crossing the river. the trail of clothes and personal items and articles that are being left behind. I mean, the razor wire, the barbed wire, and chain link fence. It was just kind of stunning. Border Patrol was there. Texas DPS, also, many other law authorities were there, and we got to see that firsthand. Get to talk to very many different people about what was really happening.
So here we are, thousands of miles away from the southern U.S. border, Representative, but yet Governor J.B. Pritzker declaring that the state of Illinois is a disaster. Since September of 2022, he's been issuing these disaster proclamations, 18 now in a row. This, of course, is on top of the COVID-19 disaster proclamations that he issued since 2020. But he says between August 31st, 2022 and January 5th, 2023, nearly 30,000 individuals and families seeking asylum arrived in Chicago from Texas with little to no notice, issuing those disaster proclamations, which ultimately gives him the authority to spend Illinois tax dollars. And we've seen $500 million worth spent so far, with more possible. Your thoughts on the governor continuing to, manage the state under disaster proclamations?
Well, my position on the governor and his management or mismanagement of the coronavirus problem, of this immigration problem. The solutions are quite simple, but him and the mayor of Chicago and the president of the United States continue to ignore what the solutions to this problem is. But you're right. We've discovered over the last several months, you and I have talked about this, the budget bill that was passed last spring that set the majority party priorities. The governor has already busted the budget, or will soon, on the health care that was slated to be, last spring was estimated to be 1.1 billion. They actually included 550 million. DHS reported their estimate to be 831 million. That was in October. That's a $300 million budget buster. And then we found that in the last year and a half, the governor spent just over 700 million for housing and clothing and other care for these migrants. This is in addition to the money that Chicago was spending and that the feds are pouring into this crisis all across the United States. This is really, really important from a budgetary standpoint. The governor, we also found out that in the budget implementation bill last spring, that the governor was able to move double the amount of money per line item from 4% to 8%. So you have Democrat priorities that said, hey, look, we need this money for housing assistance for our citizens and the like. And the governor's moving that money to take care of a population that's not here legally. I'm not sure what the majority party thinks of that, other than this is going to put a phenomenal amount of budget pressure on things this spring.
How do we get control of this? Of course, you mentioned, the Biden administration needs to tackle the border situation, but how do we get control of the governor's use of executive authority in this fashion? I mean, it's been now, most of the past 4 years that the state's been under some kind of disaster proclamation, allowing for little oversight on how those funds ultimately get spent.
Right. Well, that's why this trip to the border was important, to bring attention to this very important issue. We have railed on the governor. We think that he is misusing his emergency powers. We think it ends after 30 days. The General Assembly needs to be called in and work through these issues. But evidently, either the governor is not allowing that, or the majority party doesn't want to tackle it. I'm not sure what it is, but it is what it is. And so it's disappointing because of what is happening. I mean, and we can get into this, but I think it's not all about the money, which is a big deal. And this is going to burden taxpayers. Every taxpayer in the state of Illinois is going to put a burden on them. But when you talk to the Border Patrol, and again, we didn't get to talk to the director of this Mission Hope, Border Hope, but she was on a Face the Nation interview yesterday, I think, and I don't know when that was recorded. But she said not all of these crossings will result in asylum for these individuals. And she talked about, the injuries, the death. I mean, there's people literally drowning in the river. The farm we visited, 57 bodies were discovered in 1 week on this pecan farm in the last few months. I don't remember. That's just 1 week. That wasn't all of them. The rapes, the trafficking, the list goes on and on. There is a human toll here that the White House is all in on. The Mexican government is all in on. The cartels are all in on this. And this is just shameful to allow this behavior to continue to go on.
State Representative Brad Halbrook with us. And what message would you say needs to be sent to the governor's office in order to, I don't know, put the pressure on the White House? Because as of right now, it's just been, more resources being requested from the federal government. Those are taxpayer resources, but even, the Mayor Brandon Johnson out of Chicago may give a little bit of lip service to the idea of immigration reform, but when it comes to the border being as porous as it is, I mean, I'm seeing estimates it's more than 10 million people have come across just in the Biden administration.
Right. I mean, the numbers, in the past, and there's always been about 300,000 to 400,000 worth of crossings. But on day one, when President Biden was sworn into office, he reversed all of those policies. The crossings quadrupled. They're continuing to be on a record pace. Just in the Del Rio sector, which is 290 miles, I think it is. Don't quote me on these exact numbers, but it's just a small fraction of the border. Nearly 300,000 people crossed in December alone. I mean, this is 10,000 a day that's coming across the border just in one section that's less than 300 mile long. And so the message is really quite simple. I think they need to get a grip on this situation by securing the border. I mean, we saw in the afternoon, or it was about midday on Thursday, 3 migrants that had got up on a sea container. They border portions of this river with sea containers. They put razor wire or concertina wire up on top of that. They were actually able to make it to the top of that container. U.S. Border Patrol put a ladder up against the container and literally helped them down. Because if they fall and they injure something, then we've got them to, patch back together. And so that really just makes it even more complicated to deal with the situation. So the message that the governor and the mayor of Chicago needs to send to the White House is secure the border, get a grip on this situation. And before we continue, 630 buses bringing nearly 30,000 people to the city of Chicago alone. That's just one city. They're going everywhere else. And so I don't think it's any more complicated than that. What's hard is making that decision to do that. And evidently the governor and the mayor of Chicago and the mayor of New York and many others don't have the stomach for that.
Well, and as you said, it's not just Chicago that's receiving these. We're getting more stories over the weekend of some of the suburban areas seeing migrant buses drop people off at train stations. And these individuals clearly are not ready for a Chicago winter, showing up in shorts and sandals. So clearly this is an issue that's not just impacting Chicago taxpayers and the state taxpayers, but also suburban taxpayers as well. How concerned are you in your area of the state, down in central southern Illinois, that you've got the possibility that this could continue to spill over into other parts of the state?
Well, I think I'm really concerned about it, and I think it's going to, it's already happening. It's going to amp up, I think, in the coming weeks and months. We see these municipalities putting up ordinances or fines for buses that can't unload and, the flights that are coming in. So it's very concerning because we see, the mayor of Chicago wants to be a sanctuary city until he has to. And so we've got communities outside of Chicago that live in Illinois, of course, that are Illinois as a sanctuary state. They're not all in on the sanctuary state or city status, but yet they're gonna be the recipients of some of these folks. And again, I don't want to sound cruel and harsh here and say, hey, people shouldn't try to better themselves, but there is a legal process to get into this country that's been in place for decades. And this is putting undue pressure on all the systems, all the infrastructure, all the finances, and the human toll. It's just stunning what's happening here, and it's got to get under control.
State Representative Brad Halbrook, greatly appreciate you taking the time with us this morning. We'll definitely connect in the near future on this and plenty of other issues. All right, be safe out there.
Thank you very much.
It is Bishop on Air with YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and elsewhere. Of course, like, subscribe, follow along on the issue of the governor and his executive orders. I talked with State Senator Terry Bryant about it, but let's hear what Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson had to say recently on MSNBC with Al Sharpton when talking about the ongoing migrant influx.
Many black mayors has been the focal of this. In fact, on Thursday, New York City Mayor Eric Adams filed a $700 million lawsuit against 17 charter bus companies who transported migrants from Texas. What are your thoughts about the case, and is this an action you would consider taking as well?
Well, look, you're absolutely right about the intentions of Governor Abbott. He is attacking democratically ran cities, and particularly cities that are being led by black leaders or leaders of color. This is unconscionable. And it's a very raggedy approach. And quite frankly, not only is it reckless and raggedy, but it is evil-spirited.
So again, we've heard that same type of rhetoric from Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, but I mean, the realities are the humanitarian concerns, but also the financial concerns. And before Governor J.B. Pritzker issued his 18th disaster proclamation concerning the migrants, I connected with State Senator Terry Bryant, who fully anticipated that the governor was going to reissue yet another disaster proclamation. Here's some of that conversation I had with her on Friday.
This will be now like an ongoing 5-year order, right? Over and over and over again, whether it was COVID or this. So I can't see that his power has been bridled in any way, or has by the legislature, by the majority party. So why wouldn't he issue another one? So yeah, I anticipate he'll file another executive order, which means that, he's able to continue to spend taxpayer dollars with little to no transparency. If your listeners really didn't pick up anything from like COVID, it was the ability for the governor to spend. I made huge issues of the fact that remember IDES had 2 contracts that were, I think one was 16 million and one was 9 million. It was like $23 million total that went to IDES, that Deloitte, the contract went to Deloitte, totally no bid contracts. So procurement even goes away. I think that's the thing that taxpayers aren't, maybe really don't have a full grasp of. So if nobody's checking him, or if he's spending like unbridled in this, so far, his personality says to me he will file another one, and when he does, it'll be business as usual.
Again, the governor did indeed file that 18th disaster proclamation on Friday, and State Senator Terry Bryant talked about the impacts of such actions when it comes to the taxpayers and how their resources are going to be used in dealing with the, quote, disaster.
Right. So I'm going to say what I've said all the way since the beginning of COVID, and that is, no matter what the issue is, there are 3 co-equal branches of government, and the legislature under Democrat leadership really just gave up our authority to the executive branch. And I would say in a lot of cases it's been given up to the judicial branch. So there's plenty of bills that were passed this last legislative session where we argued that it was unconstitutional, and then whether it was President Harmon or whether it was Speaker Welch, when you confront those kind of things, they say, we'll see you in court, right? In this case, the governor has been allowed to do what he does because the legislature hasn't said, stop, you're in our lane. You don't have the authority to do that. So as long as he continues to be allowed to, because the Democrat leadership in the Senate continues to allow him to do that, then why would he stop? So so to your question, the way this gets stopped is all of a sudden the Senate Democrat leadership has to allow for the entire legislative body, especially in my case for the Senate, to say, no, that's not your authority. You cannot do that. But he's been given carte blanche to do that. And so he does it.
In a conversation I had with Terry Bryant on Friday, state senator from Murfreesboro, talking about the ongoing disaster proclamations that the governor has entered, and what other steps are there that the legislature could take. Could, say, Senate Republicans file a lawsuit because you talk about this, what Senator Bryant's saying is the executive branch not being properly checked by the legislative branch. Could the legislative branch file a lawsuit, and especially if the Democratic leadership aren't willing to check the governor's 30-day executive order powers?
I don't know, because I'm not an attorney. I don't know if that's the option, but it's not really an appropriate option. The appropriate option is for the legislature to do their job. We have the authority to stop this, and you stop it by basically saying, no, here are the laws that we have in place. Here are the bills that we're filing in order to, curb the spending. Here's what we're going to allow to be spent, because the governor can only spend the money that is appropriated to him from the legislature.
And I did reach out to the Senate President's office to get a comment. Did not receive anything back. Also reached out to the governor's office. But Bryant says, hey, clearly something needs to happen, and it might have to happen from the White House.
Well, I mean, obviously, the first thing that has to happen is you have to close the border. Cannot continue to allow people to just pour over our border. Certainly, I would be calling it, because this isn't fed. I mean, I'm not federal. I'm state, so it has to be stopped at the border. That's ultimately where we go. The stay in Mexico policy under the Trump administration was effective in stopping that movement at the border. So, as far as Illinois goes, I guess the first step would be stop the bleeding at the U.S. border.
So again, that's State Senator Terry Bryant, and a conversation I had with her on Friday, just after we talked live with State Representative Brad Halbrook. We'll be tracking this, obviously, because now we're on a 18th disaster proclamation when it comes to the migrant situation, and lawmakers coming back to Springfield, set for next week. They'll be back in on Tuesday. Could the funding for the ongoing migrant crisis be top of mind? We'll see what exactly transpires, and we'll keep you updated on all of that. It is Bishop on Air. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow along, and you can obviously support the program by checking out some of the merchandise below, or just by telling your friends about the program each and every weekday morning. All right, stay tuned. We've got tons more coming up, as always, with Bishop on Air. A ton happening when it comes to gun laws, not just in Illinois, but across the country. Top headlines, of course, include the California Safe Places law that seems to be in legal limbo. So you're hearing a lot about that, but you've also got the ongoing issues with the National Rifle Association and the chief over there, Wayne LaPierre, stepping down at the end of this month. He's facing some civil fraud charges in New York, but clearly a lot of people having some mixed feelings about the NRA, especially considering all of the different litigation we've seen in Illinois. Not really coming from the National Rifle Association. It's coming from other groups like, the Federal Firearms Licensees of Illinois, the Illinois State Rifle Association, and even you've got the Firearms Policy Council that has been suing the state of Illinois and other states. So has the significance of the National National Rifle Association really waned recently. Because again, as you see in some of the headlines, Wayne LaPierre is stepping down, announces resignation. Longtime leader. He's been there since like 93 or something. NRA chief Wayne LaPierre announces resignation ahead of trial. Reuters reporting that LaPierre head for New York graft trial after his resignation. So some people claiming victory, others saying good riddance, even some in the live chat saying about damn time. So interesting to see those comments. So those are some of the big news items when it comes to the Second Amendment, but I did want to share a couple of things here. Of course, we've got in Illinois litigation against the state's gun and magazine ban and registry ongoing. Despite the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals ruling on a preliminary injunction, they did issue their mandates to the district courts last week. So that mandate now in place, they can move forward with dealing with the merits of these things. And we've seen the merits, at least when it comes to scheduling conferences, being ready for later this week. Judge Stephen McGlynn in the Southern District, in a case that's challenging the gun and magazine ban and registry on Fifth Amendment grounds, he has ultimately said they're going to move forward with this. And you had the states try to delay a response to that Fifth Amendment argument. Judge McGlynn denied delaying that response and said that the state has to respond by the 19th of this month. But coming up on the 12th, later on this week, there will be a scheduling conference to talk about how they're going to proceed forward with this case on the merits of the Fifth Amendment arguments. So that's going to be interesting to watch. We'll bring that to you as best we can. Again, that's the 12th. What is that, Friday of this week? So we'll be watching that closely and keep you guys updated there. But something else I did want to share with you as well is kind of interesting. If you follow me on Twitter, you can also see I retweeted President Non-FUD, and he shared an interesting chart from the ATF, and it's the National Firearms Act registration weapons by state. And if you go to that actual document, you can see some fascinating things, and especially when you get through a lot of the other documentation on this. And this is an update from 2021. All right, so this is the ATF document from 2021. And what this really, I think, kind of highlights is something we heard from Todd Vandermeide several weeks ago when we saw the number of FOID card holders registering firearms in the state of Illinois. Even Todd Vandermeide, he had said that this is possibly because of those who are NFA registration requirees. They have to file, and comply with the laws. So if you look here, and we'll bring this up in some detail. Exhibit 8 from this document from the ATF, National Firearms Act registered weapons by state. And it shows in Illinois, there were, a total of 144,000 items, from short-barreled shotguns to short-barreled rifles to silencers to machine guns to destructive devices and any other weapon. And of course, you've got machine guns totaling 30,000. You've got destructive devices, about 103,000, and then short-barreled rifles, 10,000. So you could see here, 144,000 items that, at least in 2021, the ATF has. Now, the National Firearms Act regulates machine guns, and you always hear people, machine guns have been banned for a while. Well, they have a lot more regulations on them. I don't know all the hoops that certain people have to file, but you have to essentially register your fully automatic machine gun if you own one with the ATF. So those individuals, typically it could be federal firearms licensees. You've seen over in like Las Vegas and other states where people can rent a machine gun to shoot at a range. So you've got that. But what's fascinating again is to compare those numbers with the latest Illinois State Police statistics, with the numbers of individuals completing a disclosure, around 29,300. Total number of firearms disclosed, 68,900, with the total number of disclosures, 112,350. Now, I'm not suggesting that only those who are NFA compliant registered their fully automatic firearms with Illinois State Police, but if, again, you look at the numbers here, the total number of disclosures, 112,350, compared to the total number of different types of firearms, 144,000. This was in 2020. 21 from the ATF, it does raise some interesting correlations, so to speak. So is that why we're seeing the firearm registration numbers that we're seeing, especially with the ongoing litigation? But what's also interesting is how the other media is reporting on this. The Chicago Sun-Times had an article on Friday. Most owners of, quote, assault weapons in Illinois appear not to have registered them as law requires. There are minimal consequences for failing to register, and whether the law is even enforced depends heavily on where you live and how authorities discover an unregistered gun. So you've got the article going on and quoting several individuals from state police to even those who own firearms. And one in particular, the Sun-Times talked to Roger Krall, owner of the retail store R Guns in Carpentersville. He said that he's registered none of his personal weapons, at least one firearm he owns, meeting the state's definition. So again, Krall telling the Sun-Times that they have not registered. And you've got others as well who are telling the Sun-Times kind of their thoughts on all of this. State police say decisions on how to enforce the Protect Illinois Communities Act will be up to each individual law enforcement and prosecutorial jurisdiction within Illinois. So that guidance has others saying, look at those sanctuary states, sanctuary counties, where they say this is a Second Amendment sanctuary. I know you've got the term sanctuary being used for migrants, but when it comes to the Second Amendment, you've got counties all across the state of Illinois that ultimately are saying, no, they're not going to enforce these types of gun bans. Even Robert Beavis from Law Weapons being quoted in the Sun-Times saying you basically be saying that you have an illegal weapon if you register it after the January 1st deadline. I personally wouldn't do it, Beavis said, and he does have his own kind of law locker that he's promoting to allow people to take their firearms and store them with law weapons. But others, including you got Dan Eldridge with Federal Firearms Licensees of Illinois. He just also is, very clear in the different types of information they're putting out, making sure that people know what's going on. But you've got just the myriad of concerns and questions about all of this. And still, even though you have the deadline come and gone, it's clear that people did not comply, and whether or not you have astonishing low registration numbers. So Max and Shooters, they have a blog post, how low is the compliance rate for the state's gun and magazine ban, and he writes that it appears that compliance with PICA was astonishingly low, much lower than already low rates of compliance in other states like New York and Connecticut. And here's their estimate. They break it down. There's 2.4 million FOID card holders in Illinois. It's a reasonable proxy for number of gun owners. Surveys of gun owners conducted by the Washington Post last year estimated 20% of gun owners own an AR-15 style rifle. The Washington Post article is behind a paywall, but you can find it in other ways. But other studies indicate as many as 30% of gun owners have an AR-15 style rifle. But it's important, I think, to note Illinois' gun and magazine ban isn't just about ARs or AKs. It's about handguns that have a threaded barrel. It's about certain types of rifles that may not be ARs but fit different categories. It's about semi-automatic shotguns. So there's more than 170 different firearms named in the law, and then you've got the certain features that may be considered an assault rifle or an assault weapon. But back to Max and Shooter Sports blog post here. They go on to say there's no reason to presume that the Illinois rates of AR-15 owners differs from the national average. 20% of 2.4 million people is approximately 500,000 AR-15 owners. Again, that's just the AR-15s. Illinois State Police received affidavits for 29,357 individuals. And if so, we've been using the number 1.22% because that's, the percentage of those who have filed an affidavit compared to the total number of FOID card holders. So you've got that coming out to about 1.22% of FOID card holders who have disclosed they have a banned item. But if you use some of these other numbers about the number of FOID card holders or gun owners in general who have an AR-15, just the AR-15, not the 170 other different types of firearms, and that number comes out to around 5.9% compliance. But it goes on to say, but wait, the real compliance rate is lower because again, we're talking about all these different types of firearms, a lot of shotguns, Ruger 1022 rifles, some of the 30,000 NFA items in Illinois not owned by law enforcement or FFLs. So again, hinting at that ATF number. So they believe that as much as they've sold in AR-15s and just AR style rifles, you've got to add hundreds of thousands to that. So we're now at 600,000 owners. They say that makes the compliance rate about 4.2% compliance. So that's low. And these are all just different estimations because really we don't know the true scope of non-compliance. But clearly that compliance rate is very low. Governor J.B. Pritzker has yet to officially sound off on this. He has not had an official public event where the media can go and ask him questions. When that's going to happen, we'll be watching his daily schedule to see where that happens, but there's going to be a lot of different types of questions that are going to be provided to Governor J.B. Pritzker for when he does get back in front of the media. So that's just some of the latest analysis. Again, big dates coming up. On the 12th, you've got a scheduling conference dealing in the Southern District of Illinois with the Fifth Amendment argument against the state's gun and magazine ban. So we'll be watching for that, but plenty of other things going to be dropping in place as we watch all of this play out. Sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell as we go live each and every weekday morning here with Bishop on Air. All right. Follow me on X, follow me on Facebook, and again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here with YouTube. All right. Plenty more coming up here with Bishop on Air, as always. More headlines out of Chicago that splashing on the news pages, and not pretty. Last week, we talked about the record number of law enforcement officers shot across the United States, and including, I forgot to mention this, but we had that Illinois State Police officer that was shot in Springfield by a murder suspect coming down from Chicago. But you have two Chicago police officers that were killed in the line of duty last year. Well, another officer shot, and talked with William Kelly, a reporter out of Chicago, about that earlier this morning, and got his sentiments of what's going on the ground there. Here's what he had to say he woke up to this morning.
I woke up this morning, Greg, to helicopters, which is the, you don't need an alarm clock in Chicago. You've got sirens, you've got helicopters, and sure enough, a police officer was shot in the Gold Coast. Apparently he was trying to prevent, and this is a story that I'm going to run out and cover as soon as we're done here, a crash and grab at the Prada store. Okay, so this is what is happening every day in Chicago. Mayor Johnson says that there is a solution, one word solution, Greg: reparations. He believes that if we give violent criminals reparations for slavery, they will stop the armed robberies. This is an odd admission of racism on his part. The obvious admission being that the victims of these crimes are white and that they are being targeted because of their race.
So again, talking with William Kelly earlier this morning, and of course, the number of police officers shot. How is that going to ultimately change some minds?
Well, the number of police officers has been down by, I think, over 1,000 for years now. That does not appear to be changing in the right direction, but apparently Governor Pritzker has a solution for that. A bill that or a law just went into effect January 1st to allow non-citizens migrants to become police officers. Now, this I've talked to many citizens in the city of Chicago, including citizens of color, Hispanic in particular, and they are not happy with this idea. They do not think that this is a good idea. Every single day we click on refresh the screen, we see migrants that are involved in any manner of crimes. They're being given court dates. It is yet to be seen if they are showing up for any of these court dates. But another disturbing, I guess, story that we're hearing is that migrants are swapping out their identities. Now, I don't know how many identities you have, Greg. I have one that I've tried very hard in my life to honor and respect. It happens to be, my father's name on top of it. He was a Chicago public school principal, so he did a very good job of maintaining that identity. But apparently migrants have a superpower of multiple identities, Greg.
So again, when I chatted with William Kelly earlier this morning, we talked about the police officer that was shot and the news he got on that, how it's impacting recruitment in the city of Chicago. But what about the ongoing migrant crisis? You've got 18 executive disaster proclamations being made, and doesn't seem to, really provide for a fair amount of oversight of how those tax dollars are being spent. What's this look like on the ground in Chicago? Again, William Kelly from earlier this morning when I chatted with him.
Oof. Well, sadly, we don't see any accountability for any of this spending. Mayor Johnson just announced that he was going to free up millions of dollars in COVID money to spend on migrants. COVID money that many of the Chicago City aldermen didn't even know existed, and certainly didn't know that you could just use that money for any crisis that comes along. It really is something that is unsustainable in the city of Chicago. There's really no plan. There's no accountability. Buses are arriving every single day, and this is a kind of an odd footnote to this. They're arriving in the suburbs now, including the suburb of Western Springs, which, as a kid growing up on the south side of Chicago, I always thought of Western Springs as the hinterlands, Greg, where, the Disney princes and princesses, frolicked or something like this. The mayor of Western Springs had a sign on her front lawn that said, "All are welcome, all is love, we love science." But that sign has apparently disappeared. Overnight, it's gone, and now she's saying that the buses of migrants that are being dropped off at her doorstep need to go straight to Chicago, Greg.
What about, the ongoing sentiments from those on the streets in Chicago? Are we going to see a political sea change? Something I asked William Kelly earlier this morning.
Well, it is a one-party city and state, as you know, Greg. If if Pritzker wanted to pass a law tomorrow that all men who go on the Greg Bishop show wearing a blue tie are immediately felons, he could pass that law, and it would pass unanimously, probably with Republican support. So there doesn't seem to be the kind of leadership that is making my fellow citizens feel safe. In societies where leaders care about their citizens, they have mandatory, believe it or not, gun training. Like in Israel, for example, citizens are required to learn how to operate a gun, to own a gun, to carry a gun. In Illinois, we have violent repeat offenders who are out on gun charges, awaiting trial, and they're right back out on the street posing on social media with assault weapons, with extended magazines. Yet our governor is saying that the law-abiding citizens need to somehow have their gun rights restricted. 911 calls in the city of Chicago, Greg, are not being responded to. Imagine someone is kicking your door in. You have somehow had your gun rights restricted. You call 911, there's no answer. Maybe the police arrive in an hour or two. That is what we're dealing with in the city of Chicago right now, Greg.
So I want to thank William Kelly for joining me to talk about what's going on in Chicago with the migrant situation, with the police and law and order situation. Clearly, we'll check back in with him next week to see if much has changed, if anything. So that's what I got for you here with Bishop on Air. Greatly appreciate you guys taking time with us each and every weekday morning. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share the stories with your friends. Follow me on X throughout the day, and you'll be able to stay plugged in to what's going on in the news cycle when it comes to these and other issues. All right, that's all I got for you. Of course, I'm going to be looking for what happened in conference, the U.S. Supreme Court with the Calkins case. I was looking at the number of cases they had in conference, and it was dozens upon dozens upon dozens. I want to say they probably had like more than 100 different cases they were reviewing. So I have yet to find that conference report. I'll do what I can to find that for you. We'll talk about that some more tomorrow. Maybe we delve more into the firearm registration numbers. I'll see if I can connect with, say, Maxon Shooters Sports, for instance, Dan Eldridge with Federal Firearms Licensees of Illinois, to get more of a concise breakdown of his estimates of the people who have registered firearms in the state of Illinois. But all accounts is it's low, and seems to be more of an indication of people just not complying with what they see as an unconstitutional law, as this law continues to be challenged in the federal courts. But again, don't forget, I believe it's Friday, the 12th. We'll have a status scheduling conference with the Southern District of Illinois and Judge Stephen McGlynn tackling that Fifth Amendment argument. So we'll hear about that and so much more. All right. Have yourselves a wonderful start of the week on this Monday, and we'll be back at it tomorrow morning with Bishop on Air.